Today, I'll share with you 3 simple tips related to mending ripped pants and adding a touch of style to your clothes. These are all very easy tips to do at home, requiring no complicated tools, but they will help your clothes look neater and newer. If you also have items that are slightly damaged or want to refresh old clothes, these tips will be very useful. Tip number 1. Sewing ripped pant hems. During use, the hem of pants is very easy to unravel, or the seams come undone, especially in areas that are frequently moved. When that happens, you'll see the fabric separate into 2 distinct edges. If left for too long, the tear can become larger and harder to repair. Therefore, I will guide you on how to sew the hem of pants back together in a simple and secure way, restoring the hem to its original state. First, prepare a needle and thread. Then, thread the needle and begin sewing. I poked the needle down one edge of the pants hem, then brought the needle up and pulled the thread straight to create the first stitch. This first stitch will help secure the thread to the fabric. Next, I moved the needle to the other edge of the pants hem, poking the needle into the fabric to begin joining the 2 sides together. Then, I brought the needle back to the original edge and continued poking to the other side. I continued sewing back and forth between the 2 edges of the pants, creating interwoven and parallel stitches between the 2 sides of the fabric. This sewing method is quite similar to zipping, helping the 2 edges of the fabric gradually come closer together. During the sewing process, I tried to keep the distance between the stitches even. This will result in a neater and stronger seam when finished. At the same time, you shouldn't sew too loosely to avoid the seam coming loose after use. I sewed each stitch in turn until the entire torn hem was finished. Once the entire seam is sewn, gently pull the thread in a straight line. At this point, you'll see the 2 edges of the fabric automatically close together, making the hem of the pants look much neater. This is a crucial step because it helps hide the seam inside. From the outside, the stitching is almost invisible. Finally, tie a knot to secure the thread on the inside of the pants, then cut off the excess thread to complete the process. After finishing, you'll see that the hem of the pants is sewn securely, neatly, and almost without any visible signs of repair. With just a few simple steps, I was able to repair my torn pants without having to throw them away. Tip number 2. Decorating the collar. First, take a t-shirt and lay it flat on a table for easy work. Then, fold the 2 collar sections at the shoulders together, ensuring they are symmetrical and aligned. Once folded, hold the collar in place and begin marking the desired position. Place your left hand at the edge of the folded collar, using your hand as a guide to estimate the distance. Next, use tailor's chalk to mark a point near your little finger. This point will be where you begin creating the decorative detail. Next, mark another similar point on the opposite side of the collar. Once marked, unfold the collar and lay the shirt flat again. At this point, you'll see 2 symmetrical markings on the collar. These are the 2 positions where you'll sew and create the accents. Pre-marking these points will help ensure that both sides of the collar are even and beautiful when sewn, avoiding any misalignment or asymmetry upon completion. First, prepare the needle and thread. Then thread the needle from the inside of the shirt to the outside at the marked points. Starting from the inside will help conceal the stitches, making the outside look neater and more attractive. Next, sew a stitch along the marked line to secure the initial position. Then, thread the needle slightly sideways, creating a small gap between the stitches. Now, thread a purl onto the thread. Then continue to bring the needle under the fabric to secure the purl on the collar edge. Each purl will sit right on the marked line, creating a very beautiful decorative row. Then, I brought the needle up again, continued threading horizontally, then added another purl and sewed it down. I repeated these steps, adding purls while sewing until I reached the marked section. While sewing, I tried to keep the stitches evenly spaced so the purls would be aligned and look nicer. You can observe carefully while doing this to make it easier to follow. After sewing the entire section, I gently pulled the thread. At this point, the purls would automatically move closer together, creating a continuous and striking decorative line on the collar. Finally, I tied a knot on the inside of the shirt to ensure the pearls wouldn't come loose during use, then cut off the excess thread. After completion, you will see that the collar is decorated with small, sparkling pearls, looking both delicate and adding a beautiful accent to a simple t-shirt. With just a little attention to detail, your shirt can become much more stylish and stand out. Tip number 3. Create a distinctive accent on the collar. In this final tip, we'll still create an accent on the collar, but the method will be slightly different from the previous tip, giving the shirt a more unique and novel look. First, lay the shirt flat on a table for easier handling. Then, fold the collar in half so that both sides are symmetrical, and use tailor's chalk to mark the center point. Next, open the collar and use a ruler to draw a straight line from the marked point down towards the body of the shirt. This line will serve as the center line for shaping. Then, mark another point about 5 centimeters to the side. This point will form a right angle with the initial line. Next, mark 2 more points on either side, each 2 centimeters away from the center line. At this point, the points are clearly defined and symmetrical. Finally, I connect all the marked points together. Once connected, you'll see a fairly clear shape formed. This is the part I'll sew to create the collar accent. Marking and connecting the points like this helps me predetermine the style to be sewn, ensuring that when finished, the details on the collar will be balanced, clear, and more aesthetically pleasing. After marking and connecting the points to create the shape, I will now begin sewing to create the collar accent. First, I prepare the needle and thread, then thread the needle from the inside of the shirt to the outside at the starting point. Doing this will help hide the stitches inside, making it look neater and more beautiful from the outside. Next, I poke the needle into the corner of the first marked line, then thread the needle to the next line. The sewing method here is to sew parallel stitches, going from one side to the other, following the drawn lines. I sewed stitch by stitch, following the marked lines. While sewing, try to keep the stitches even. This will make the fold look more natural and beautiful when finished. After sewing to the end of the marked section, I gently pulled the thread in a straight line. At this point, the stitches pulled the fabric together, creating a new fold on the collar. You will see that the collar is no longer flat as before, but now has a small, natural, and delicate accent. To make this even more prominent, I sewed a small pearl right at the fold. I threaded the pearl through the needle and secured it with a few stitches to keep it in place. Finally, I tied a knot to secure the thread on the inside of the shirt and cut off the excess thread. After completion, the collar has a fold combined with the pearl as an accent, looking very neat, delicate, and different from the original. With just a few simple steps, my shirt looks much fresher and more stylish. So today, I've shared with you 3 simple tips for mending ripped pants and adding a touch of style to your clothes. With just a little meticulousness and a few familiar tools like needles and thread, we can repair old clothes and make them look nicer and neater. These little tips not only save money, but also help us reuse familiar items in our wardrobes more effectively. If you found these tips helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to follow more great tips. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.